So a friend of mine was getting ready for the Master Worlds this year. And he's a black belt. He's been a black belt for a while. Very talented martial artist. And we saw who his first opponent was going to be. And it was an opponent who had gone from white belt to brown belt in the same association as my friend, who went from white belt to black belt under the same instructor, the same association. And my friend was concerned about this first match because he had mentioned that, hey, from white belt to brown belt, this guy knows our system. Even though, he hasn't been with the association for a while, he knows our association and our system of fighting. And that sort of set me back, sort of threw me off. And then the more I went to understand it, it was like, well, the association he is in does not cross-train with other associations. So they don't invite other black belts or other instructors in to train with them. They just do everything the way the head instructor of their association taught. So they don't cross-train. So there's not any variation between each technique. So that's the advantage of their association. It's like every instructor in that association is going to teach a particular technique exactly the same. Well, the disadvantage is when they go into a tournament, their opponents have different counters and different techniques that they have not seen before. Or in this case, he was worried about an opponent who was very familiar with the system of jiu-jitsu that he had done in his jiu-jitsu association, and that person would be able to counter whatever they was doing. So that was a disadvantage that my friend felt he had. And turns out he went ahead and lost that match too. So I tell that story because from time to time people will ask me, Saad, why do you, openly cross-train with different schools in town or friends in different associations? Or like, because we're a military town, and we have a lot of people that move in and out of San Antonio, I got roughly, about 12 Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts that pretty regularly train at Semper Fortis. And then I've got probably 6 or 7 Judo black belts that pretty regularly train at Semper Fortis. And they're all from different backgrounds, they came up in different, some of them were with Gracie Baja, in previous duty stations. Some of them were with Carlson Gracie. Some of them were with Gracie Humada or Henzo Gracie. Some of them were with Alliance or Atos. Some of them were with the American Top Team. And it gives you a different look of these techniques. And what I mean by that is like, me and a good friend of mine, we come from different associations. We're both black belts. And we do the scissor sweep significantly different. Just as effective, it's the same concept, but the movement and the way we execute it is different. And it's the same way with, there's different escapes that people use that are more common in their association, or the grip might be in a different place. And it's different. And sometimes when it's different, sometimes that different technique that you see is going to be better than the way you're currently doing it. Sometimes the different way of doing it at a different association is going to be as effective, more or less, as the way you do it. And then sometimes you're going to see a technique that a different association is doing, and it's going to be not as effective as yours. But in your journey, as you see it done differently, what I enjoy is it causes me to grow, because sometimes a black belt will come in here, or even a brown belt or a purple belt, and they'll do a technique a little bit different than the way I do it. And then I have to evaluate to myself, is it better than the way I'm currently doing it? Is it just as effective, more or less, as the way I'm currently doing it? Or is it less effective? And then both me and that person that came in, we grow. Because sometimes, I stop doing it the way I'm doing it, and I start doing it the way they do it. And sometimes I see the way they do it, We exchange ideas, and they stop doing it the way they're doing it, and they do it the way I do it. And sometimes it's just, they're both just as effective, and we just both continue to do it the way we do it. And that's just a variation in our jiu-jitsu style. Because I can almost see it happens frequently. Like I'll post a technique, or my students doing a technique in class, and I'll get some comment from a person, and it's almost always, I guess, because it's always anonymous, it's a white belt or a blue belt, but it's usually a person that's only been with one school or one instructor, and it could be a mount escape, and their instructor showed them to do it exactly this way, and maybe they'll see a technique on a video that I'm doing, or an instructional video that somebody else is doing out in the www, World Wide Web, and it's a little bit different. And so that person automatically thinks because it's different, it's wrong. When in reality, it's just different. It may be better than what you're doing, maybe as good as what you're doing, maybe not as good as what you're doing. And then that's something you have to evaluate as a jiu-jitsu student. So for me, at my school, I love having various ways of doing it. And I preach to my students that, hey, I may show one way to do a deep half guard sweep in the way I set it up, in my positioning, where Professor Vitor could show something that's very similar, but still significantly different. Like when we were showing it a couple weeks ago, I have my legs one way, and Vitor locks his legs in certain situations when he's doing the deep half guard sweep. Not that one is right and the other is wrong, it's just they're different. And the challenge for the student that sees that it's different is, rather than saying, well, hey, I was with so-and-so and they said this is the way to do it. Rather than doing that, learn it exactly the way that person, that instructor is teaching it. Drill it exactly the way they taught it. And then after the class, as you continue to develop your jiu-jitsu, evaluate, do I want to currently do it the way a previous instructor did it and the way I had been doing it? Is that way better than the way the new instructor showed it, or a different instructor showed it? Is it just as good, the same, or is the way I was doing it not as good as this way a different instructor showed it? And sometimes it's just not evaluating whether it's as good, it's whether it's as good, better, or worse for your body type and for your jiu-jitsu style. And then you're going to figure out, oh, I'm going to do it the way Professor Vitor did it, or I'm going to do it the way Saad did it, or I'm going to do it the way Professor Jonathan did it, or Professor Frankie. You will evaluate after giving it a fair shot in class and drilling it and listening to the instruction. You'll evaluate, hey, how do I really want to do this? What's the best fit for my game? What works for me? And I love that about the school. So a person can come in, they'll see a technique, same type, it could be the scissor sweep, but they might see it 3 different ways. And then through their journey, they figure out, okay, how do I like to do it? What's the way I'm going to go with of these 3? Or there may be more. And it varies. I always tell my students, when a higher belt puts a grip on you, my favorite saying is, that grip is always for the worst possible intentions for you. So look at that grip. Say a lower belt, they may just put a grip on you. They don't know where to put their hands. So it could be random. If a black belt or a brown belt puts a particular grip on you, it's with bad intentions for you. So a lot of times it's in your best intentions to break that grip. But grips make a huge difference. So just enjoy the journey. Realize that as you journey through, your jiu-jitsu will look different. When you start jiu-jitsu, your jiu-jitsu ends up looking like your instructor is a white belt. You're like, yeah, you do it exactly the way they do it. But as you grow, the more techniques you see, the more variations of the technique you see, you end up developing your own style that's going to be very different than your instructors. And I think that's a good thing. But there are associations out there where every technique is exactly the way the founder did it, or the head of the association did it. They have a curriculum that's set. There's a particular way to do each technique, and that's how they do it. And there's pros and cons to their system as well as my system or any school system. But what do I like? I like to see variation. I like to see other ways to do a technique and evaluate what's better and what's worse. And so that's my concept on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and on running my school. So I'll have an instructor come in, and when I know they're, hey man, this is a legitimate black belt, legitimate brown belt, and I'll welcome them. Man, show us a technique. Show us how you do this. And rather than interrupting and saying, oh, my way is better, it's like, no, I want to see how you do it. And maybe I can grow from it. Maybe it's better than the way I'm doing it. And that's exciting to me, because I always want to be growing. And therefore, I always want my students to be growing. All right, that's my ramble for this week. Appreciate y'all tuning in. If you got a question for next week, feel free to fire below. And until next week, ciao.